The Ukrainian military carried out stabilization measures near the southern city of Kherson on Saturday following the end of an 8-month occupation by Russian forces, a retreat that cast a further pall on President Vladimir Putin's designs to take over large parts of Ukraine. In a regular social media update Saturday, the General Staff of Ukraine's armed forces said Russian forces were fortifying their battle lines on the river's eastern bank after abandoning the capital. Ukrainian officials from President Volodymyr Zelensky on down cautioned that while special military units had reached Kherson city, a full deployment to reinforce the advanced troops still was underway. Even when the city is not yet completely cleansed of the enemy's presence, the people of Kherson themselves are already removing Russian symbols and any traces of the occupiers' stay in Kherson from the streets and buildings, Zelensky said in his nightly video address on Friday. Photos circulating Saturday on social media showed Ukrainian activists removing memorial plaques put up by the occupation authorities the Kremlin installed to run the Kherson region. Moscow's announcement that Russian forces plan to withdraw across the Dnieper River, which divides both the Kherson region and Ukraine, followed a stepped-up Ukrainian counteroffensive in the country's south. In the last 2 months, Ukraine's military claimed to have reclaimed dozens of towns and villages north of Kherson city, and the Ukrainian General Staff said that's where the stabilization activities were taking place. The Russian retreat represented a significant setback for the Kremlin some 6 weeks after Putin annexed the Kherson region and 3 other provinces in southern and eastern Ukraine in breach of international law and in the face of widespread condemnation. Russian state news agency TASS quoted an official in Kherson's Kremlin-appointed administration on Saturday as saying that Henichesk, a city on the Azov Sea some 200 kilometers, 125 miles, southeast of Kherson city, would serve as the region's temporary capital after the withdrawal across the Dnieper. Ukrainian media derided the announcement, with daily newspaper Ukrainskaya Pravda saying Russia had made up a new capital for the region. Like Zelensky, Ukrainian Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba sought to temper the excitement over the invaded nation's latest morale boost. Kuleba also brought up the prospect of the Ukrainian army finding evidence of possible Russian war crimes in Kherson, just as it did after the Russian Defense Ministry pulled back its forces in the Kyiv and Kharkiv regions earlier in the way. Every time we liberate a piece of our territory, when we enter a city liberated from Russian army, we find torture rooms and mass graves with civilians tortured and murdered by Russian army in the course of the occupation of these territories, Ukraine's top diplomat said. Despite the advances in Kherson, other parts of Ukraine continued to face civilian casualties, energy shortages and other fallout from Russian military attacks and Putin's illegal annexation of Ukraine's Kherson, Donetsk, Luhansk and Zaporizhia regions. The state-owned electricity grid operator, Ukrenergo, announced emergency blackouts, which could go on indefinitely, in 8 regions that included Kyiv, where a Russian military strike hit an energy facility critical to supplies to the capital. While much of the focus was on southern Ukraine, Russia continued its grinding offensive in Ukraine's industrial east, targeting in particular the Donetsk region city of Bakhmut. The Donetsk region, the Ukrainian General Staff said. Pavlo Kirilenko reported Saturday that 2 civilians were killed and 4 wounded over the last day as battles heated up around Bakhmut and Avdiivka, a small city that has remained in Ukrainian hands throughout the war. Russia's continued push for Bakhmut demonstrates the Kremlin's desire for visible gains following weeks of clear setbacks. Jake Sullivan, the White House National Security Advisor, re-emphasized that the United States would defer to Ukrainian authorities on whether or when to negotiate with Russia about a possible end to the conflict. Russia invaded Ukraine, Sullivan told reporters on Air Force One en route to Phnom Penh, Cambodia, as part of a trip by President Joe Biden to international summits in Southeast Asia. If Ukraine chose to stop fighting and give up, it would be the end of Ukraine.